I flushed my mental illness away, but it manifested in reality. My name is Daryl, and I am the unluckiest man on Earth. That might sound facetious, but it's true. Minor and major misfortunes have befallen me at every juncture of my life. I blame the darkness at the centre of the universe. You may have seen it, may know its face. It is a horror that governs us all. And you may think I've lost my marbles. I wouldn't blame you, given what I just said. What makes me so special? What astronomically bad luck have I endured? Well, I'll tell you. I'm always unwell. I've broken bones more times than I've counted. I've been in 25 car crashes. 25. And I should note that I was always the passenger, so it had nothing to do with my poor driving. My relationships always end through unfortunate events, such as bad timing. A better suited candidate is always chosen over me for promotions. I've lived in 4 different houses and suffered 10 separate floods. Oh, and to top the cake with a spoiling cherry, I suffer from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Simon, I often call him. Simon says. It tells me to act, and I act. Yes, I'm very funny. I amuse myself, at least. Anyway, I was certainly shafted by the genetic lottery in that regard. You may imagine, then, my surprise at actually winning something for the first time in my life, 2 years ago. But the universe grinned wickedly. It would transpire that my winning straw was, in fact, the shortest of the lot. The wind of fate hadn't changed direction at all. I beg your pardon? I asked. You've won a free trip to Colt's Island Resort, the group facilitator repeated. All support group attendees were entered into a prize draw. I should have mentioned that. I've never heard of Colt. I laughed. Me neither, Daryl, she replied. But I'm sure the invitation will tell you more. Congratulations. The emailed invitation, however, only raised more questions. It read, Hello, lucky winner. My name is Colt, and this ticket serves as admission to my private island. You are one of 5 fortunate guests. Here, you will be treated to an all-expenses-paid stay at my 3-story mansion on a beautiful, secluded isle. During your trip, you will receive the gift of freedom from mental disease. Safe travels, Colt. Nobody had ever used the words lucky or fortunate to describe anything pertaining to me. Winning something felt incredible. However, the fleeting feeling of elation was quickly replaced with distrust. What game are you playing? I asked the universe. I feared the answer to that question, but that didn't deter me from packing my bags. At some point in my life, something good had to happen to me. That was what I told myself. Of course, the prospect of curing my disorder seemed one step too far. Whatever the case, I was certain, knowing my luck, that the boat would capsize. I decided I'd probably never even make it to the island. That would have been far less horrific. The small ferry, aptly named Lucky Lucy, like some cosmic joke, arrived at the harbour on a blisteringly warm day in June 2022. I boarded, along with 4 other anxious souls. We huddled together near the bow, and having only exchanged awkward glances on the dock, finally introduced ourselves. Emma was a 47-year-old restaurant owner from Massachusetts. She suffered from bipolar disorder. The businesswoman was plain and homely. Short in stature, with frizzy blonde hair and weathered eyes. She wore a forced smile. Letitia was a 28-year-old personal trainer from London, and she suffered from schizophrenia. I remember thinking that she was a woman of mesmerising beauty, tall yet petite. Ryan was a 60-year-old history teacher, and he suffered from severe depression. The man was only a little taller than Emma. He had grey, thinning hair, foggy-rimmed glasses, and a perfectly round face. Finally, Nathaniel was a 34-year-old stockbroker, and he suffered from borderline personality disorder. He was a stoic man with a lanky, slightly malnourished build. We spent the duration of the 4-hour voyage getting acquainted. Everybody got along well. And as the mound of land on the horizon grew, I started to accept that something good might actually lie in wait. It was a small forested paradise, with no signs of civilization, other than Aaron Colt's vast villa. A free holiday and a chance to rid myself of mental illness. My dreams were coming true, but good fortune didn't sit well with me. To my surprise, as the sun began to set, we arrived on the island. Arrived without disaster. Once the ferry docked, the 5 of us exited onto an old unstable pier. I started to imagine it collapsing beneath our feet. I thought that might be how we would meet our end. But that intrusive thought was interrupted by the arrival of our mysterious host. "Hello," the man bellowed. "I'm Aaron Colt, and you must be my lucky ticket winners. Emma, Letitia, Daryl, Ryan, and Nathaniel. Is that right? Welcome." "There's Willy Wonka," I whispered to Letitia. She snorted with laughter, and Aaron scowled at me, though he surely hadn't heard what I said. His false grin, dominated by veneers too large for his mouth, quickly returned, but I noted the fury that had momentarily lingered in his eyes. For a second, the facade had fallen. That had been the real Aaron Colt. Besides his untrustworthy face, however, the host had an entirely unremarkable appearance. Medium height and build, black buzz-cut hair, doughy cheeks. The man led us across grassy terrain to his astonishing abode. It covered a few acres of land at the edge of the island's forest. Aaron Colt heaved open the imposing double doors of his grandiose home, and we strolled into a lavish lobby area. "Homes like this frighten me," Letitia shuddered. "Let's hope Mr. Colt can fix that." "Listen, I know we have entirely different illnesses, Letitia, but one thing I've learnt is that it's better not to expect a cure," I said. "That's a depressing thought," Letitia replied. "Is there any other type of thought?" I quipped, making her smile. Aaron seated his 5 guests in a grand dining room, and I spent the next hour becoming acquainted with Letitia. She talked about her struggle with schizophrenia, and I talked about my struggle with obsessive-compulsive disorder. I told her that I called him Simon. "You like to joke, don't you?" she smiled. I get it. Laughing eases the pain." I was far too engrossed in the girl to notice the oddness of our host and our setting. In hindsight, I know I should have paid greater attention. "This final course is special," Aaron announced, as his members of staff served plates of indistinguishable green mush before us. "Novelle." "Not particularly appetizing," Emma blurted. "What's so special about it?" "Oh, never judge a book by its cover," Aaron smiled, seemingly proud of the dozenth cliché he had used that day. "Ignore the look and taste of the food. It's less about what it can do for your body, and more about what it can do for your mind. The 5 of us, invited to the island for various psychological impairments, exchanged disbelieving glances. Surely, Colt's cure for mental disease wouldn't be so simple. "Eat," he instructed. "This is the moment that changes your lives. Bid adieu to your afflictions, my friends." Hungering for freedom from years of inner torment, I did as I was told. We all did. The 5 of us inhaled bowls of thick green mush. It didn't taste particularly offensive. Could have been tomato soup if one were to focus on its consistency and flavour, not its colour. That was it. There was no dessert. There were no evening activities. Aaron Colt rose stealthily to his feet and announced that the evening was over. "My employees shall show you to your rooms," he said. "Rest and recover. In the morning, you will be new people." As we were entering the lobby, our eerily enigmatic host dragged Nathaniel to one side and whispered something into his ear. Nathaniel frowned, but he quickly joined the rest of us on our slow, sluggish march up the stairs. The meal was sitting heavily on my stomach, and I could tell the other guests felt the same. "Ugh, no chance of a second magical meal to fix my irritable bowels," Ryan sarcastically grumbled, clutching his gurgling abdomen. The member of staff said nothing as she hurried the old man to his room. Emma complained of stomach pain as she was escorted to another door. Letitia bid me good night as she was shown to her quarters on the second-floor hallway, and the employee nodded at the final door on the left for me. "What about me?" Nathaniel asked. "Third floor," the worker curtly responded. "Attic." From my open doorway, I watched the lady lead the 5th guest up the final flight of stairs. Something was disconcerting about Erin's treatment of Nathaniel. I wondered what our host had whispered to the stockbroker. My room was little more than a broom closet. Disenchanting, given the impressive nature of the mansion as a whole. Still, I had a breathtaking view of the ocean from my sole window, and there was, admittedly, an impressive 4-poster bed in keeping with the Edwardian decor of Aaron Colt's beautifully bizarre palace. I flopped onto my bed, nursing both a horrendous headache and a gnawing sensation in my gut. I felt atrocious. Yet, drenched in beads of sweat, I told myself that must be a good thing. I told myself that the novelle, or whatever Mr. Colt had called the dish, must be cleansing me of toxins. And I eventually managed to rest. But something quickly startled me from my sleep. The creak of a floorboard from the far end of the room. Quivering, I peered over the top of my duvet, and I laid my eyes upon something so ghastly that it defied all reason. A stone man. I realised, in my state of spiralling horror, that the terrifying thing had actually been standing there since I first entered the room. I'd simply mistaken him for one of Aaron's decorative statues, but he was very much alive. The entity twitched as it surveyed me with ceaseless chasms, and I realised that I knew him, though I had never seen him in a physical state. Simon.
"Tap your forehead 3 times,
it gently requested.
"If you do not, everyone will die."
I tried to wail, but a paranormal power muted me, and as I started to leap out of bed, I heard scuttling noises across the wooden floor, as if a living wave were crashing towards me. Before I thought or acted, piercing pangs of pain erupted across my thighs, and I looked down to see lumps wriggling beneath my cover, like the bubbles of a boiling broth. Shaking manically, I peeled back the duvet to see what was tearing at my legs. Tiny terrors. Marble-bodied minions of the stone man. Horrid yellow eyes and chipped teeth shone in the cave under my cover, and blood trickled down my pale legs as the arachnid-shaped statues of the stone man feasted on my flesh. Then, as I tried to escape from the covers, the creatures sank into the quicksand of my blood-stained bedsheets, leaving my massacred legs as a warning to abide by Simon's rules.
3 taps,
the man reiterated.
Otherwise, something terrible will happen.
You don't control me, I whimpered, failing to conceal my horror. I'm free. Simon's demeanour shifted, as it always did whenever I ignored his demands. He was the abusive partner that once resided in my mind. Pleasant until I challenged him.
3 taps,
he growled.
now.
Suddenly, the stone-skinned entity began swelling to fit every nook and cranny of my box-sized room. Its arms, like pebbly petals, grew towards me. He was furious that I had denied his request. I finally managed to slide out of bed in one fluid motion. With injured legs swaying from side to side, like a foal taking its first steps, I staggered towards the exit. Those awful limbs of the statue almost snatched me as I clumsily opened and shut the door behind me. Standing in the pitch-black hallway, I expected the stone man to come crashing through the door. He didn't. And I realised something once my heart started to slow a little. I was horrified, but my fear was rational, based on what I could see and feel. There were no intrusive thoughts in my brain. My disorder was gone, or rather, it had fled. Have you seen the stone man? If so, please forgive me. He lurks in dark places. You might not even notice him at first. The monster camouflages itself to weasel its way into your life. It was unobtrusive at first. It lowered my guard. Don't let him into your head. Don't let him see your fear. He's real now. He can hurt you. Once the creature wraps its frail fingers around you, its power blossoms. It is a growth near impossible to remove. That was the figurative speech I used to give about my disorder. However, since the events of Aaron Colt's Island, it has become a very literal warning. These past 2 years, I've hardly been able to sleep. I've seen and heard things. He's out there. Before I discuss the present, I suppose I should finish discussing the past. After I escaped the clutches of the supernatural statue, I stood in the darkened corridor and trembled. Darryl? The sudden voice startled me, but I felt an immediate sense of relief when I twisted my head to the left. It was Letitia. Oh, are you okay? Aaron did something terrible to us, I breathlessly told her. Letitia nodded at me with tear-filled eyes. She silently beckoned me to follow her to her room. Still wearing our pajamas, we tiptoed down the corridor. The squeaking floorboards iced the soles of my bare feet, and I clenched my entire body in petrified preparation. Letitia's door was wide open, and her bedside light illuminated a sickening spectacle of horror. The walls of her room were alive, and they were watching us. Two peeled strips of wallpaper served as eyes, and the decor undulated, much like those awful arachnids beneath my duvet. "Do you see that?" she tentatively asked. "Or is it in my head?" "I see it," I whispered, shaking. Letitia looked at me with eyes bulging like those of the wallpaper demon. It was a soul-broken stare. You do? Nobody's ever seen what I've seen before," she cried. The walls were swallowing me and I barely broke free. But it was real. What's happening?" "Aaron Colt did exactly what he said he was going to do," I said. "He cured us, but our sicknesses escaped." I gently closed the door on the terrifying wallpaper eyes that were gazing into my very soul. There was a sudden crashing sound from Ryan's room. Before I'd even turned to face the source of the noise, Letitia sprinted down the corridor, and I struggled to keep up. When she opened his door, she screamed, "No! Ryan!" I darted down the hallway and peered over Letitia's shoulder to see what fresh hell awaited. I wish I'd asked her to close the door. I wish I hadn't seen what she saw. In Ryan's custom-made torture chamber, the wood of his four-poster bed had developed a life of its own. The ceiling of the bed had unfurled into some demented wooden noose. It had strangled the man. His limp, lifeless body was glued to the top of the bed. Ryan had a complexion whiter than that of the stone man, and his mouth was agape in a horrifyingly eternal scream. Emma's door suddenly flung open, and the woman came crawling into the corridor. Her nightgown was coated in claw-shaped scratches, and she was bawling loudly. With one of her bare, bloody feet, she kicked her bedroom door shut. What is happening?" she croaked, looking at us. I don't know how he did it, but we're free. Free of disease, Emma. We have to check that Nathaniel's okay," I found myself saying, despite the primal urge to run. I'm sorry. No," Emma sobbed. The woman fled, sprinting down the stairs of Aaron's expansive mansion. Only Letitia and I remained on the second floor. There was no sign of any staff members. Not a sound from another living person. Letitia silently nodded at me, and I regretted suggesting my courageous trip to save Nathaniel. Climbing the decaying staircase to the third and final floor, I had the most dreadful premonition. I already knew that we weren't going to find Nathaniel in one piece, but I felt something awful in his place. After opening a wooden door at the top of the stairs, we discovered that the entire third floor had been converted into an attic space. Most of the area was littered with dusty books and stacked cardboard boxes. It was difficult to discern anyone who might have been inside. "Nathaniel?" I called. No response. Lighting the way with our phone torches, Letitia and I manoeuvred through the spaghetti maze of junk stacks. I glanced at the titles of Aaron's books. The unnerving man had an entire library up there. Veil-breaking, non-science, and Little Fairies were 3 titles that stuck in my head. A glimpse into the man who inhabited that malevolent mansion. There was a booming clatter of items from the far side of the enormous attic. "Nathaniel?" Letitia cried. There was no answer, but the continuing sounds of rustling boxes and toppling items. I didn't like it. Being there seemed wrong. I tried to save Ryan because my gut had told me to run towards him. With Nathaniel, my gut was telling me to run away.
Aaron lied to you.
A voice boomed. Near the staircase, a door slammed. "He's locked us in here," I whispered to Letitia. "What? No, we would have seen him if he'd slipped past us," Letitia replied, but her trembling voice revealed her uncertainty.
Do you want to know what's wrong with me?
The voice giggled, bouncing off the sloped ceiling. Letitia and I looked at one another with haunted eyes, no longer wanting to find Nathaniel. No longer wanting to find whatever else was in there. I feared that we would find him by the door we had entered, but we had no other viable option. We turned around and started to weave back through the boxes, and I hoped that we had misheard everything. Hoped to find the door unlocked. Horrible laughter echoed around the room. I killed the shell. Now I'm free. Finally free of that weak, fleshy meat sack. A scuttling sound from the ceiling froze us once more. I shone the phone torch above me. There was nothing, but I knew I'd heard something. Just as I knew I didn't imagine the quiet thud which sounded somewhere amongst the carnage of Aaron's attic, as if something had plummeted from above. He's boxing us in here, I whispered to Letitia. "Stop it," she pleaded. "You're scaring me."
You should be scared,
the voice whispered. I cast the phone light onto the stack of boxes before us and caught a glimpse of a horrid monstrosity. Some insidious interpretation of Nathaniel. The gangly, gloomy gentleman, but far taller. His body rose above the stacked boxes, with flesh that had mutated into a black, dripping slime, and his bloodshot eyes glistened in the darkness. The creature, which had clearly detached itself from the real Nathaniel, contorted its body into a thin, twisting spiral before gliding between the boxes, gliding towards us. "Run!" I yelled at Letitia. She didn't need to be told twice. We dashed around the cardboard column, narrowly avoiding Nathaniel's demonic grip. Then, once more, I heard that scuttling sound above. "Go!" I screeched. Letitia reached the door before me and flung it open. She started to sprint down the staircase, and I followed. A sinister snarl erupted behind me as I closed the door on the sludgy face of the toxin that had been flushed from Nathaniel's body. I was barely halfway down the stairs when the door opened again, but I kept my eyes ahead. Letitia and I hurled ourselves down 2 flights of stairs, plunging into the lobby area. The burning lobby. A fire had already engulfed the ground floor, and it was crawling up the steps. I do not know who set the place alight. Maybe Emma. Maybe a member of staff. Maybe Aaron himself. As Letitia and I ran across the scorched lobby, I could feel Nathaniel's demon on my tail. I was certain he would pull me into the flames. I don't know what to tell you. All I know is that Letitia and I scarcely made it out of the mansion alive, along with a few members of staff. After we gathered on the grass, I eyeballed the inferno before me. No dark things fled the building in pursuit of us, so I still choose to believe that those demons must have perished. It's the only way to sleep at night. A worker contacted the Coast Guard and the relevant authorities were notified. When the ferry arrived to pick us up, the police commenced their investigation. Nobody ever found Emma, and Aaron has been missing for 2 years. He abandoned his island home. Did the man know things would go so horribly wrong? Was that part of his cruel plan? Nobody ever talked about what they saw on the island. I didn't see anything about it on news programs, and the investigation was never publicly announced. The police officers may have seen something that they wished could be unseen. I understand that there are many loose ends, but I've told you as much as I know. In spite of the horror I suffered in the past, I keep thinking about the present. I've been collecting information from people who've seen something akin to the Stone Man. That's why I fear the entity may have escaped. If so, then heed my warning. He comes for those with fear in their hearts. He latches onto that fear, and he doesn't let go. He has rules, arbitrary rules. To refuse his demands comes with dire and unthinkable consequences. Don't let the Stone Man inside your head. He is a parasite, and there is no cure.